so we can have a list of questions already in there. And those of you that want to raise your hand to ask questions, use that raise your hand button, and they're going to come in orders, how fast you raise your hand. And we're going to try to cover all the questions. And put your hand down after you ask the questions. So that's a little bit kind of like housekeeping there. And I think Dr. Jeff Kinney already introduced the speakers. So we are a team working on tea at the LSU AgCenter. There's also a regional team. I know some of you are from out of Louisiana, and we will be glad to answer all your questions. Whenever you have questions, we will also be glad to connect you to with there's a regional tea research and extension team. We'll be more than glad to connect you with your state universities. A little bit more housekeeping. Everyone, please mute your mic and turn off your video so we can focus on the speaker. And speakers, please turn off your mic and mute your mic and turn off your video also, so we can focus on who's talking. And I think we have the LSU AgCenter IT. David, are you there?
David's out this morning, but this is Adam. I'm here with you.
Okay, Adam. Yeah. Okay. So Adam, yeah. So if there are any issues with the presentation or anything, yeah, we'll be glad to have you there.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So okay, let's get started.
And you might mention that for those of you who haven't used Teams before, in the upper right hand corner, you might have a bar, or in the lower bottom of your screen, and there's both two people that show participants, another box that says is where you type any questions you might have.
Yes.
That text box, just click on it. And then also, Yan mentioned raise your hand. So at the end of the discussion, if you have a question, you can just click on that, raise your hand, and then we'll let you know whenever you can ask your question.
Okay, let me show you. So this is what, let me see if I can go back to that screen. So yeah, Jack was talking about is on the top banner. There's the show conversation, that's your chat. And then there's raise your hand. And then there's three dots. And in that dots, you can also there are some. Go ahead and get the program rolling. So Dr. Pika, go ahead and share your screen. And I'm going to get the record started. Oh, Adam, are you recording?
Yeah, and I already hit the record button for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great, thank you, Adam. Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the LSU AgCenter T101 webinar. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Dave Pika. I am a professor of horticulture in the School of Plant, Environmental, and Soil Sciences on campus at LSU. What I would like to do today, at least to start things off, is to kind of give you an overall world perspective on some of the major tea producing countries, and overview on the little bit on the cultural practices and the market opportunities for as a specialty crop tea here in Louisiana. Tea has a very interesting origin and history. It originally is from southern China and northern Burma, the border region between those two countries. It dates back to the 27th century. Legend has it that Emperor Shennong was sipping hot water under a tea tree, and a leaf floated down into his cup of hot water, infusing it with rich color and appealing aroma that later became what we now know as tea. And then eventually the tea was disseminated to Japan, introduced to Japan by Zen Buddhist missionaries, and they used this in religious meditation ceremonies, spread widely throughout the Japanese society, and to this day, it's the tea ceremonies, if you've ever had a chance to go to Japan, are very, very elaborate, interesting forms of art. As the Europeans went to the East Indies and the Far East, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the British explorers, they brought back tea to Europe. And then, of course, as the Spaniards and the Italians and the Portuguese, the Dutch came to what is now the United States, tea was introduced to the U.S., originally into New Amsterdam, which is known as New York City now, in 1650. Tea has a very interesting history in the United States, taxed by the British. That resulted in the Boston Tea Party and eventually the Revolutionary War and the founding of the U.S. And then a final little note, the iced tea that we all enjoy here in the Deep South was created in the 1904 World's Fair, which was in St. Louis, Missouri. World tea production. World tea is one of the major commodities around the world of economic importance. It's planted on about 7.25 million acres, and the acreage is growing significantly, around 3% a year worldwide, not in every country, of course, and there's over 50 countries that commercially produce tea. But about 80% of the world's tea comes from 5 countries. Number one, they are listed: India, China, Kenya, Sri Lanka, and Turkey. Global tea production and consumption are projected to keep rising over the next decade, driven mostly by robust demand in developing and emerging countries such as China, India, many of the Asian countries. The increase in consumption is not so prevalent in Europe and North America. Black tea comprises the majority of the global market share, followed by green tea, and then later today we'll hear about some of the other teas, the whites and the oolongs and some of the other specialty teas. So the map shows the major producing countries in the top 5 in terms of their percentage of the global production. China's number 1 in the world, about 31% of the tea, followed by India. And then close after that, number 3 is Kenya in East Africa, and then Sri Lanka, south of India, and then Turkey. Tea is an evergreen shrub. We, of course, know it here as, well, botanically, as the genus species is Camellia sinensis. And the leaves and the leaf buds are used to produce the tea. Interestingly, tea is the most widely consumed beverage in the world, after water, of course. There are 2 main commercial species, or subspecies, I should say, of the Camellia sinensis that comprise tea of world importance. One is a smaller leaved Camellia sinensis subspecies, mostly grown in China. Smaller leaves, it's resistant to cool temperatures. And then we have the other larger leaf, Camellia sinensis assamica, mostly grown in India, also Sri Lanka and Kenya. Little larger leaves, and it prefers a little warmer temperatures. I will say, though, we will be talking about the different types of tea, the blacks, the greens, the oolongs, the whites, etc. Both of the subspecies, sinensis and assamica, are used to produce all of the major tea types. So it's not that, well, black tea comes from assamica and green tea from sinensis. No. All of the teas are produced from both subspecies. Soil, climate, altitude, cultural practices, time of the year, and processing techniques all affect the flavor of the tea. Much like wine, it's got its terroir, its appellation. Many factors influence the quality, the flavor, the aroma of tea, in addition, of course, to the subspecies. And then tea flavor and perceived health benefits continue to drive world consumption. World leading tea producing countries in terms of their overall volume, again, China number 1, India 2, Kenya, and Sri Lanka, followed by Turkey, Vietnam, Indonesia, Argentina, Japan, and Iran. But the top 5, again, comprise about 80%. The top 5 countries there on that list comprise about 80% of the world's tea production. And the tea is grown in a combination of large plantations and also small-scale areas. The #1 producing country in the world is China. China is mostly grown in the southern part of China, either the deep south, Sichuan province, Yunnan province, or the southeastern part, Fujian province, the southeastern part of China. Again, China produces about 31% of the world's tea, mostly in the southern part again, about 70,000 tea producing enterprises. But the top 100, again, it's kind of, in most cases, the leading businesses account for the largest percentage of the volume of most products. The top 100 enterprises, and they call them enterprises in China, kind of a combination between state-run enterprises and state-run businesses and private sector. But the top 100 comprise a little less than half of the domestic tea sales volume in China. The government-owned China Tea Marketing Association controls all the marketing, tea marketing out of China. And green tea accounts for about 60% of the production in China. This is very different than India, Sri Lanka, and Kenya. And about 2/3 of the tea produced in China is consumed domestically by the 1.2 billion populace. #2 in the world is India. 3 major areas in the dark green. The northeastern part, the Assam region, the far northeastern part there in the foothills of the Himalaya Mountains. Then we also have other areas, West Bengal, and then the Tamil Nadu area in the south, different agroclimatic conditions. But it is of major significance in India. India is the second largest tea producer in the world. And although there's 3 major areas, tea is growing in every region of the country. As a former British colony, India is, they have tea estates. Some of them are government owned and run, and some of them have been privatized. About 26% of world production of tea comes out of India. Interestingly, about 4% of the national income from India comes from tea. And when you have a country of 1.2 billion people approximately, and that makes up 4% of your national income, it is a huge, huge crop. In fact, it's at the ministry level. They have a cabinet minister that oversees the tea industry. The Assam region in the lowland area of northeast India, a beautiful, lovely region there, is the largest tea production area in the world. And that was the birthplace of Indian tea. The first estate founded by the British in 1837 was in the Assam region. Other regions are very important. The cool and wet Darjeeling region in the foothills of the northern Himalaya area produces some of the world's most exquisite and delicately flavored and most expensive teas as well. The third leading tea producing country in the world is Kenya in East Africa. Kenya is one of the most rapidly growing tea producing countries in the world. They have very favorable agroclimatic conditions, the eternal spring in much of Kenya. Of course, it's known as a big game country and a lot of savannas and national parks, a beautiful country in East Africa. It's a major part of their economy. It's one of their top 3 export crops out of Kenya, year-round production. As a former British colony as well, Kenya, tea was introduced to Kenya from India, actually, by the British in 1903. Now we have about 500,000 smallholder farmers, and they produce about 60% of the tea volume in Kenya. And it's increasing. It's rapidly growing. It's probably the most rapidly growing country in the world in terms of tea production. Large-scale plantations supply about 40% of the tea. It's the world's leading black tea exporter. As I said, China was mostly green tea. Kenya is mostly produces black tea. And that's a processing technology that we'll get into later. Kenya has very good agroclimatic conditions, well-distributed rainfall, good, well-drained volcanic soils, a very mature and significant industry in Kenya. And then just a few other countries, Sri Lanka, a beautiful island country formerly known as Ceylon, again, another former British colony south of India in the Indian Ocean. They have a significant tea production. That they're very close to Kenya in terms of overall export volume of tea, mostly black tea. beautiful areas, the Central Highlands, the Candy area, New Aurelia area, lovely cool areas. Again, year-round tea production. The government runs most of the estates in Sri Lanka, and much like India, as a former British colony, the British introduced it there. A lot of the technologies and infrastructure look very similar between India and Sri Lanka. And just a few others on the list. We have the other major significant producers would be Turkey, mostly along the Mediterranean Sea, a very significant contributor to world tea production. And one country that's really coming on strong in terms of many specialty crops, including tea, would be Vietnam. As many of you may know, it's now become the second largest coffee producing country in the world, overtaking Colombia. So we'll see what happens if they overtake some of the others in tea. But in addition, there's multiple other countries. There's about 50 countries that produce tea commercially, but there's, again, big five. But some of the other ones that are increasing in importance, some of the Southeast Asian countries, Thailand, Burma, Bangladesh, Nepal, and then that whole Eastern Africa area. We mentioned Kenya would be the leader, but the neighbors, Uganda, Tanzania, nearby Rwanda and Burundi are all important tea producing areas, and they're looking at tea as generating revenue and foreign exchange to strengthen their economies through the export of high-value tea. So those countries are increasing production as well. But maybe the most relevant to us here in the Deep South in Louisiana would be those areas along the Black Sea there in Georgia and Turkey, Azerbaijan, of course that'd be the Caspian Sea. But the teas that we have here many of them have been introduced from Georgia, from the country of Georgia, of course, former Soviet Republic. Now it's independent. Years ago, the Soviet Union established the largest tea production area for their country to be redistributed throughout the Soviet Union. But then after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there really wasn't much of a demand for Georgia. It wasn't very good quality, old Soviet style, but they started to regenerate that. And now it's coming on, it's getting a little bit stronger there, right along the Black Sea in the eastern part of the country of Georgia. Just a few minor overviews. Again, tea is subtropical. It does well. It's well adapted to Louisiana here in the Deep South. We have good agroclimatic conditions. We have sufficient rainfall. Tea can be cultivated through a wide range of elevations. So it is certainly a specialty crop that bodes significant attention for further commercial development here in Louisiana. But the harvesting practices, whether we're in China or Sri Lanka or Kenya or perhaps even here in the United States, are pretty much the same. The tea comes from the two most recently expanded leaves and that terminal bud, all harvested by hand. Mechanical harvesting has been tried, but the quality is not as good as hand harvested. So that's obviously an issue, is labor availability, affordability, et cetera, in terms of enterprise competitiveness. After the tea is manually harvested, then it is, and these are slides taken from Sri Lanka, or it could actually be any of the countries that we talked about. The tea is then weighed. Each of the worker gets a certain amount of payment based on the weight that they pick. Then it's taken to the bottom right to the big tea processing plant. Many of these, of course, were established by the colonial folks, the British in this case, in Sri Lanka. And then it goes through, and we'll be hearing about this later in the webinar, the post-harvest processing procedures. The fresh tea has to be withered, it has to be rolled, oxidized, and dried. And then it's either formed into green tea, black tea, oolong, white, and then we have different grades. We have it for the tea bags. We will get into that a little bit later, but the process is fairly similar. Technology's improved a lot, and a lot of it's been automated now. But anyway, in summary, in terms of what we have opportunities to develop here in Louisiana, The overall, the consumer demand for tea, both green and black, and the other specialty teas continues to increase. This is driven mostly by young urban consumers. They're the fastest growing demographic segment that's consuming tea. Obviously, we all are familiar with the perceived health benefits. That's certainly aiding consumption. Many reports have implicated tea positive benefits, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, weight loss, other effects in terms of minimizing other human illnesses. Organic market is a specialty market. It's growing quite rapidly. Organically growing teas. Specialty flavors are increasing in terms of consumption and demand. But the bottom line is, as we go forward and try to develop a commercial tea industry here in the Deep South, or wherever tea comes from, markets do require consistent supplies of high quality tea. It'll take good production practices, good post-harvest care, and proper marketing. So thank you for your attention, and look forward to entertaining any questions or discussions during the appropriate time.
Okay, our next speaker will be Dr. Jack Beasley and horticulturist Jason Stack. They're going to cover what's available, the history of tea in the U.S. and what's available in terms of varieties and cultivars in the U.S.
All right, can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right, great. Jason just stepped out, but he'll be in. So David did a great job of introducing you to production of tea throughout the world. And that's really an important thing to consider when we start talking about tea in the United States. As he indicated, in the province of Yunnan, right there on the border with Nepal, you really do see where tea really was first used. And it dates back, as he said, thousands of years. You know, when we think about us as a country, we're not even really 250 years old. So it's been around quite a while. And when we talk about the cultivation of it, again, it's thousands of years old. So they have a lot of experience with this plant and actually processing it to drink. And as I say, you have to really appreciate that. And one of the things you really need to know is that China thinks of tea as being historically, culturally significant. And so us learning about it, we're really, really behind them in that. And we need to appreciate everything that they do know. And you can see here from some of the museums, actually a tea museum, you can see the teapot and the roller. And you realize that it's played a big impact on them culturally. Obviously, tea was actually drank more by the higher echelon, but now socioeconomically, it's drunk by everyone. The United States has had a unique relationship with tea. David also hit on that first it was brought to the colonies early on. But it's probably most famously associated with the Boston Tea Party. But as you will notice, if you look at this slide, that our consumption is really, we are an importer of tea. And a lot of our tea consumption has been tied to trade with China and what has happened in China. The other thing we can get out of this is that when there have been political disruptions, World War II, things of that nature, that it has our country thinking, well, maybe we need to produce tea. Two other things that are pretty significant is in 1904 is the drinking of iced black tea. And as you'll hear throughout some of these presentations, in the United States, most of the consumption of tea is black tea and it's iced tea. The other thing that was and I don't know whether everyone would agree, but at least it was an invention. I don't know if it was a progression, was the tea bag. And as I say, our history of tea importation really is tied with China. And when there's been disruptions, we've looked at other places for importing tea, such as India. And they even began research and developing stations and looking at tea production in the United States with Lipton, more specifically over in South Carolina. Obviously, that did not hold, but it has been looked at before. And the other thing that tea has done, I don't know if you know this, but this year a tea bag was used to find an air leak in the space station. So tea has been used more than just for consumption. We have done some surveys here in Louisiana trying to understand tea and how it's used, and we will have a presentation that goes through that. What I will say is that tea is known and is consumed here in Louisiana like it is in much of the Southeast and even the United States. And I think that's important to know because it's not like you're trying to introduce people to an exotic fruit or a exotic meal that they've never had before. It really is something that they already consume, although there's still a lot of education that needs to be done in the different types of teas and the different processing of teas and their benefits. As I say, it already is an industry here. Unfortunately, it's really one of consumption and importation. It's 12 billion as of 2016. As I said earlier, a lot of the tea we drink is black tea and iced tea, and it's important to know what people are drinking because it tells you where do we need to educate the public, but it also tells us where there may be opportunities. Obviously, green teas have been associated with health benefits and have increased in consumption. Of course, some other things, like we still drink a lot of bottled tea. Loose tea is gaining more popularity through education of the consumer as well as hot tea. And we're seeing that take effect because we're seeing a decreased demand in bag tea. As I say, one of the big things about tea is talking about its health benefits. And there has been a tremendous amount of research conducted on the benefits of tea. And you'll see things like reduced caffeine, antioxidants. The important thing is there's still a lot for looking at tea in the American diet. And I think you're going to see more and more of that occur as tea consumption trends change. I do want to highlight some of the health benefits. A lot of it can be tied to cultivar. It's also going to be tied to processing. So both things are going to be really important when you start talking about the health benefits of tea. One of the things I'll point out is with white tea, it has a potent anti-cancer properties, which I think is great. I really had not had a lot of white tea, and in the last 2 or 3 years, I've started drinking more of it. So I'm hoping that this holds true in terms of its anti-cancer properties. With saying that, I want to use my time to kind of get us a little caught up, but to really get you thinking that the United States really does have a history with tea. We just don't have a strong history of producing it. And that is something we would like to change because we think there are some markets and some quality teas that can really be, well, are actually being grown throughout the United States. And we would like that trend to continue. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Mr. Jason Stagg, who's going to talk about current tea production and some of the cultivars.
Thank you so much, Dr. Beasley. Okay, so at the bottom of your screen, it'll still say Jeff Beasley, but this is Jason Stagg, and I work with Dr. Yan Chen at the Hammond Research Station. And what I wanted to talk to you guys about today was really about tea varieties and cultivars. And the reason why this is important to understand is that if you're new to tea, I'd like for you to make sure you understand that tea varieties and cultivars are different types of tea plants. They're not different types of tea processing. So I'll just quickly pop back to this slide. that Dr. Beasley showed just a few minutes ago, the different types of tea are actually the black tea, the oolong tea, green tea. All of these have to do with the type of processing. Remember that different types of teas can come from the same plant or come from the same cultivar. Now, over time, there may be different cultivars that have lended themselves to taste better for certain types of tea processing, but I just wanted to make that distinction that what we're going to be talking about for the next few minutes will be different types of varieties and cultivars of the plant itself. And this is important because just like we do at the Hammond Research Station with our ornamental plant trials, not all varieties you will discover are going to grow well in every location. So something that's growing well in South Carolina may not grow well in Hammond, Louisiana. And that's important because we want to have very vigorous plants growing for our tea farms and our tea fields. The other thing is just because you may find a really vigorous variety, it doesn't mean that that's going to necessarily produce the best flavor of tea or best quality of tea growing in that particular location. So that magic formula is really finding which teas actually will produce a really good flavor, but also are very vigorous. So I know we've covered this already, but this is going to be the plant that we're talking about. It's Camellia sinensis. Dr. Pica covered some of these growing conditions and some of the characteristics of the plant, but it is an evergreen shrub, and it does like warm, humid, and rainy climates, and I think that would be familiar to a lot of us in Louisiana, Mississippi, and the Gulf South. Just an added benefit, you will notice that tea plants are going to bloom in the fall and the winter, and it provides a great forage for bees during that season and other pollinators. The flowers can actually be dried or processed to be added to make like an herbal tea as well. Now, the Camellia genus, which the Camellia sinensis plant belongs to, is a really large group of plants. There are about 300 species, and if you're speaking of ornamental camellias alone, you're talking probably over 30,000 varieties. So it's a huge number. So there's a great diversity in this group of plants. This is one of my favorite lesser known camellia species that's used for ornamentals, and it's Camellia fraterna. A lot of you will be familiar, of course, with Camellia japonicas. These really large plants grace southern gardens in the wintertime with their beautiful blooms. And then, of course, a workhorse of the ornamental landscape industry, Camellia sasanquis. They're also evergreen, but they can take full sun, and they have a lot of blooms which are smaller than japonica species. And this particular one is Leslie Ann, which is a Louisiana super plant. So you can see there's a great diversity. Now, Dr. Pica also discussed this, but I'll just do a quick review. Two broad subspecies of the Camellia sinensis plant that we do generally talk about would be the subspecies sinensis, which generally comes from, this is the China population of genetics for this plant, and then the subspecies Assamica, which is from India. And we typically focus on the Chinese varieties because those seem better adapted here to growing in Louisiana and the Gulf Coast. They can take a little bit more cold weather, and the leaves are a little smaller, as Dr. Pica said. And that's really important because the Assamica varieties generally won't survive our cold winter temperatures here. So we need to stick to looking at the genetics derived from the Chinese varieties. And just to give you a quick idea of how a natural tea farm or tea garden might look in China, this is a beautiful couple of beautiful photos here from Hangzhou, and you can see that the tea plants are not actually in rows. They're actually little individual, randomly scattered, naturally scattered plants, and that's because a lot of these are seedlings selected that fell down and germinated from larger arbor-type, older tea plants. And this is a beautiful hilly mountainous area. You can see misty, high humidity, perfect tea growing area. Now in China, because tea has been cultivated and used for thousands of years, they have a tremendous number of varieties and cultivars that are available to them. This is us visiting the Tea Research Institute in 2016, and they had over 3,000 individual accessions of unique cultivars and varieties. It was an incredible collection. There are more than that in the country, but at this particular location, they had collected over 3,000. And just to give you an idea of how different some of these plants can look, I mean, look at the different characteristics. Lower left of your screen, you can see this purple or red new growth, chartreuse in the top left, and kind of like this reddish maroon color in the top right. So you can see that there's just a tremendous diversity, and each one of these may lend different flavor profiles, and also different growth habits and growth characteristics and adaptation. Here's a couple of other photos. In your lower right, you'll see one that was really prized because it blooms so much and produces so many flowers. And in the top left, a nice spreading one with larger leaves, just a shorter growth habit. So all of these could be used and tailored to different types of production. Now, unfortunately, we do not have a tea research institute in the United States yet. Let's hope we move in that direction at some point. But a lot of tea plants are still being collected in the U.S., and here's a small collection that was seen in Hawaii, but nothing on the scale of what we saw in China. But here's what we do know so far about the cultivars. We know that there's about 17 to 30 named cultivars in the U.S., and the reason why that range is so large is we believe that some of the different cultivar names you see out there are probably the same genetics, just named a couple of different ways. We've got a lot of work to figure that out, though, so that's why part of the reason why you see that range. As you've heard already from our other speakers, sources generally range from China, the former Soviet state of Georgia along the Black Sea, and India, but mostly China and Georgia, and a little bit from Russia. I believe the city of Sochi, which is also along the Black Sea, which is still part of Russia. We have a lot of tea plants and scattered private collections and nurseries around the country, and we'll look at those in just a minute for the southern United States. And then Dr. Beasley and Dr. Pica both touched on the previous Lipton Tea Company research that was done, a concern about the global supply of tea still being able to be imported into the United States. So Lipton decided to try different varieties and cultivars throughout the southeastern United States to see which ones would be most adaptable to our growing conditions should the global tea supply be restricted or not imported into the United States. A couple of other speakers have already talked about the Charleston Tea Garden or the Charleston Tea Plantation, which dates back to the late 1800s. Many varieties were grown there as well. So something else that we also know about, we wish that we were not living in the Wild West of tea growing and tea variety trials right now, but as new growers in this industry, you may be performing your own variety trials. We're still working to figure out which varieties and cultivars are best adapted to our growing region. So like I said before, there's not a tea research institute, so we don't have a national germplasm repository yet in the US. So what we really need to do is some DNA fingerprinting and start to truly find the separation between the varieties, and that's going to make our work a lot easier and also make your success rate a lot better. Something else to note, and I've heard this from a couple of tea growers, in the beginning, it may be difficult for you to find a high volume of the tea variety that seems to do well in your area. And what that means is that you might actually become a tea nursery before you become a tea harvester. So places, a couple of folks like in Mississippi and here in Louisiana with Fleur, they've actually had to grow out and propagate a lot of their own tea in the beginning to get their tea fields planted. So that's something to think about. Also, something that I would like to note, we believe that you're probably going to have better early success with varieties that have smaller leaves rather than the larger leaf varieties. Not saying that's a definite, but initially you may want to try plants that have the smaller leaves. Just to give you a quick example, here's Mr. Buddy Lee, the inventor of the Encore Azalea, who is in Independence, Louisiana. Large leaf tea plant to the left of your screen. How big the leaves are, he's holding them there. And then just for comparison, a small leaf tea plant on the right-hand side of your screen. And you can see the growth habit too. That large leaf plant tends to get very tall and very big. It's much harder to prune and keep at the proper harvest levels. So let's talk quickly about the potential plant sources here in Louisiana. This is not a particular endorsement of any particular nursery, but we're trying to give you an idea of nurseries in Louisiana that have already started growing tea. And so I'm not going to read through all of these, but Mizell's Camellia Hill Nursery in Folsom has been selling at least three different varieties of tea for a few years now. Windmill Nursery has been thinking about putting some into production. Bracey's Nursery is going to have some in the fall of 2021. Almost Eden Nursery is selling at least 2 varieties, and that's a mail order nursery. And one thing that I have not had a chance to do yet is check in Forest Hill, Louisiana, at the big nursery cluster up there. There are quite a few nurseries that sell Camellia japonicas and sasanquas, so my guess is there might be some that are experimenting with tea too, and we need to investigate that. As always, we encourage you, if you're not able to buy wholesale plants, please visit your locally owned retail garden centers and ask them about tea. They may have a source for those plants. And don't forget your local Camellia societies and master gardener groups. When we get back to having plant sales and things like that, they're also a great way to find some really interesting varieties. Great Louisiana and Mississippi tea pioneers, and we owe a lot of thanks to these folks, these entrepreneurs. Already talked about Mr. Buddy Lee. He doesn't actually sell any tea plants, but he's certainly collected a lot of cultivars. Mr. David Barron, Fleur de Lis Tea Company, who's on this webinar. He has a great operation going just north of Hammond. Dr. Bill Lure down in New Orleans, who's growing tea plants in the heavier soils of New Orleans. And Great Mississippi Tea Company, Jason McDonald and Timmy up in Brookhaven. They've done a fantastic job of research up there. JD Farms has Pearl River Tea up in Mississippi as well. And then, of course, the LSU AgCenter and the work Dr. Chen's been doing in the tea team, and also Mississippi State University's done a lot of pioneering work. Okay, now this is a dense slide, and I need to speed up here so we can kind of get back on time. But I'm not going to read through all of this, but I just want to show you a collection of nurseries we know that have sold tea throughout the southern United States, and they generally have a really good collection of tea varieties that should adapt better to your location here in the South. Now, there are other nurseries around the country in Oregon and places like that that also sell tea, but we believe that if you're going to need to search outside Louisiana, Mississippi, these are probably the ones that might have varieties that are best adapted to give them a try here. We talked about the Lipton Tea Research stations that opened in the 50s and 60s and closed down in the 70s. So some of those Lipton genetics are still floating around out there, maybe named other things. Again, that's why we want to have a national germplasm repository so we can start to compare these varieties. When you call these different nurseries, tell them what your growing conditions are, what your zone is, your average rainfall. They might be able to help you pick varieties that seem to adapt better for you. Here's a slide of some great photos from Dr. Yan Chen when she visited Camellia Forest Nursery. You can just see the great diversity here again, all the different leaf shapes, colors, textures. All of these have the potential to produce different flavors of tea and different adaptation and establishment success for you. Now at the Hammond Research Station, I'll just touch briefly on this. Dr. Chen has collected quite a number of tea plants and varieties that she's planted under dappled shade in our Piney Woods garden. What really has been a great success too, though, is the actual tea production field, and that's largely focused on the Georgian tea seedlings and this Brutiful. You'll see that Brutiful tea name at the bottom of your screen. Had great success with both of those, and as you've heard from the other speakers, it's really the Georgian tea seedlings that, for us at least, seem to be quite adaptable to full sun and taking the cold. Now, in other places, such as Mississippi, at the Great Mississippi Tea Company, the Georgian tea wasn't quite as vigorous for them, didn't do so well for them. So you can see how it doesn't take very far in miles to produce completely different results for your variety success. This is just a few pictures of everyone planting the actual tea field back in 2016. And this is what the tea field looks like now. So at the foreground on the left-hand side of your screen would be those Brutiful cultivars. That was actually developed in Australia. Those are shorter, more dense. They were, I believe they were bred for container production for like home gardeners and home use. And then over on the right-hand side of your screen in the background, you'll see those Georgian tea seedlings. You can see how vigorous they are. If you notice the ones that have not been pruned, you can see the growth habit of those and how big they are. The other ones that have been pruned are at that perfect tabletop harvesting level that you'll need to establish for a tea farm. So last thing here, take-home points on varieties. Just remember that there are no officially recommended varieties or cultivars yet from the LSU AgCenter. And I'm sorry to say that, but we're getting closer to finding things that are working better. But we need your help with that. This is important for you guys to try things and let us know how they're working for you when you venture into this. Again, the genetics are not always clear about what's available out there. For example, there are a couple of different varieties named Sochi. But Sochi is not all the same genetics, we don't believe. So you'll run into some things like that. And just remember this is a great quote from Jason McDonald: what grows here may not grow there. And that just shows you that it could be 30, 40 miles away and have some different growing conditions and find that different varieties are not going to always produce the same level of success. So with that, I believe we'll get ready to go on to the break, I believe. Is that correct, Ian?
Jason, there's a
Yes.
question. If you could go back to the slide that had where you can purchase availability of tea at different nurseries.
Okay. Was it this one? Or was it the one
Yes.
for Louisiana? Okay. Let's see, Jeff, I'm not seeing the question coming up on my screen.
Yeah, you can do the ones for Louisiana, Jason.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh, let's go back one more. Wait, I need to go back one more.
That should be the question.
Okay, I need to go back to the PowerPoint and get to the right. Give me just 1 second, guys. Yeah.
Jason, you may be able to use the arrow keys to go back if you need. There you
Yeah, there. I had just switched off the other screen, so.
So I guess with that, we're ready to take questions, right, Yen?
Yes, yeah, we're ready. Yeah, we have about 10 or 15 minutes.
So I guess I'm just curious from everyone out there, is there anyone that is currently growing tea, or are they in the are you in the process of getting ready to plant?
This is David Hathaway, Corvallis, Oregon. I've got about 350 in the ground, 100 in pots. On my 6th year.
So David, which variety are you growing? Is it the Georgia tea?
I have I got some from Georgia through Timmy and Jason at Mississippi Tea Company. I planted some from Camellia Forest. I planted a bunch, probably the majority, from Big Island Tea Company. Also got another batch from Nepal from Timmy and Jason. I got the Fair Hope Select from Camellia Forest. I have a new planting from Kaw, I guess it's pronounced, the old Pinehurst location. I have another sampling that is claimed to be Assam from the Table Rock Tea Company, as well as another batch from Timmy and Jason that is the biclonal Nepal that they most recently got, 2 varieties of that. So just about everybody that I know of, and they all seem to do. I'd say I've had the most failures, I guess, with the ones that were labeled Nepal. I probably plant, I get my seedlings up, and within a couple months I plant them in the ground, which I know is too early, but it works for me. And I do lose a fair amount by planting such tiny plants out, but I replant any missing ones in the spring. But with those Nepals, I lost the most on that first winter, probably 40 to 50%. 50% would be the worst. But the ones that survive that first year, they do good. And as long as you fill in any blanks in the spring, doesn't seem to be a problem. But
Sounds good.
I have
Thank you
not
for sharing.
Yeah, any plants that did poorly, no matter where I got them.
Yeah, that sounds good. We did lose a lot of Nepal, the biclonal. We got to a drought. Just 3 days. They really sensitive to any drought. Okay, we have a question. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, this is Mark Crawford. I'm in Valdosta, Georgia. I own Loch Laurel Nursery. I'm a specialty camellia grower, mainly for ornamental aspects, but I grow one variety of tea that I sell to people who ask for it. I grow that Fairhope one that I actually obtained several years ago from the experiment station there. But I was wondering about the propagation and the fact that I find that the tea plants grow so much better if you grow them from seed rather than from cuttings. They always seem a little bit slow from cuttings. They're slow to root, they're slow to grow and take off, but the seedlings just grow like crazy. And so I'm wondering, from a commercial standpoint, developing varieties that can actually be grown from seed rather than from cuttings, where you get a high percentage of basically true to type. Because I have read in the internet that they grow a lot of tea from seed, not from cuttings, because of the fact they grow off better. Does anybody have any comment about that?
I would like to make a comment. It's kind of like a trend that more and more cutting propagated tea varieties or cultivars are available. Because for a true cultivar, a named cultivar, it can only be propagated by cuttings, but they have to be able to root and grow that root system pretty strong and quick. So that's up to the selection breeder. We visited China green tea production area in the Zhejiang province back in 2016. And I have one picture that I'm going to show to everyone. There's this production base, all cutting propagated. They only do certain varieties named cultivars that was released by the research center, the Tea Research Institute in Zhejiang, and they do 6 million cuttings per growing season. So that's very kind of like exciting to see how they do their cutting propagation, and their turnaround time is very short. The cuttings root and go out to the field in about 3 months, 2 to 3 months, much shorter time, and they use a much smaller container. It's basically a liner to go out to the field. So definitely there are some good genetics. We need to see which ones will do better with cuttings. Definitely we need to source some of the genetics.
Hey, Yan and Mark, this is Jason. I just wanted to add to that, and I think that's a really good point that both of you guys are bringing out. And Yan, I'm so glad you're going to show that photo, because I actually had to cut that out of my PowerPoint presentation for time purposes. But what we have learned, especially in talking with like Jason McDonald in Mississippi, is that you can actually plant tea seedlings out in the field much smaller and much quicker and have a better success rate than if you planted the same size rooted cutting. So the rooted cuttings you actually need to grow out into a bigger size, probably like a 1 gallon pot at least, and then that becomes a little bit more labor intensive to plant rather than planting small seedlings in a quart. And so Yan, I think you bring out a really good point. It would be great as we search for the most vigorous and the best cultivars, also which ones produce the fastest viable transplant as a cutting, because while there are so many benefits to have a seedling propagated field, you oftentimes do want you may want a large planting of a clone so that you have consistency in your tea production, your tea flavor, and that can be very important. I had to take some of these slides out too, but just to let you guys know, in general, a tea field that has been grown from seedlings will last much longer, probably 100 years, and will be much more resilient to climate, wild climate swings or weather events or a disease that comes through than a field that is all one clone. So, and that's just kind of general horticultural observations for many types of crops, but it applies to tea as well. So the disadvantage to growing a lot of seedlings out is that, as Jan said, the characteristics are not going to be guaranteed. It's probably open pollinated, and you might find some plants that are better or some that are worse, but it's not going to be the exact genetics that you may have seen on the mother plant.
Thank you, Jason. And I see there are some of you using that chat box to send in how many tea or whether or not you have grown tea. So we see all those. And other attendees, y'all can look at the chat. There are people sharing whether or not they're growing tea. And Leslie, you have a question?
Hi, my name is Leslie Barron.
Go ahead, Leslie. Try it again.
I did make those strawberry plants that Dr. Callender's sitting out there. You can look at them, see if you want to take them today.
Leslie, can you get closer to your mic? We have trouble hearing you, Leslie. Okay.
Yeah, we did have a question asking about where are good sources for tea plant seeds.
Answer that really briefly. Basically, if you are just starting and you're looking for seed sources, you can check with, like Jason mentioned, several nurseries if you are in Louisiana. If not, we can kind of get you in contact with some of the Camellia or nurseries that are also growing tea. There are several in the southeast region. Some of our tea growers already have established plants. They can also you can also check with them, see if they have seeds available. I see Jason McDonald. Hey, Jason, are you there? Do you all sell tea plants or seeds?
Yeah, I'm here. In normal years, that's why I was just typing in, we offer seed sales. It's a little bit tricky this year because of all of the lockdowns that occurred during the summer in most of the countries that are producing seeds. And so this year is a bit iffy, but normally we have seeds available. We start taking orders in August, and the seeds arrive usually in October, November, because that's when they're be careful buying seeds randomly. You can get them off Amazon, you can get them off eBay, but they're just going to be non-viable and dried up, especially if it's not October, November. So if people follow our Facebook page, there's a Let's Grow Tea sign on Facebook. Make announcements from time to time. Also, US League.
Jason, we're starting to lose your audio. It might.
You hear me?
Yeah, maybe leaning in just a little bit more might help.
Okay.
Yeah, you're loud and clear now. You're perfect.
Okay. I don't know what you heard, but if you'll follow our Facebook, which is Great Mississippi Tea Company, or Let's Grow Tea as a group on Facebook. But then there's also US League of Tea Growers. If you become a member, there's some resources in there. And from time to time, we get together and buy things. So somebody asked when were normal pre-orders. It's usually around August. But we make announcements everywhere that we're doing it. And the thing about seed orders, you've got to buy 100,000 to make it worth it. So we kind of have to do this as a group. So, it's basically on ours, we just charge cost on the seeds. So, but this year is going to be a real tough year to get seeds. But anyway, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, we have one more question. Steve,
This is Mark Crawford again.
Yes.
Can I make a comment? One thing that you may not be aware of, there is a fairly extensive tea collection at the American Camellia Society headquarters in Fort Valley, Georgia. And those plants were actually donated several years ago by Dr. Clifford Parks, who, as you probably know, was a very prominent tea or camellia researcher. Those plants are there, and I'm sure if anyone was interested in seed production that or seed, availability, that could be a place to check, because those varieties are named, and they're all on individual plants scattered through the gardens.
So Mark, you said they are not named, or they are named?
Most of them are named.
Oh, great.
Yeah, or at least they're identified through their where they were sourced.
Thank you, Mark. We have 2 more people. We need to move on, but we'll let Steve Lodge, you have a comment? Steve?
Yeah, so I pop out of this conversation, but table rock teams. So we're past that.
Steve, can you get closer to the mic? We have difficulty hearing you. Okay, if there are no more questions, we're going to move on to our field tours. After the field tour, we're going to have a tea break, and we can also discuss some of these questions, we can't cover right now at the tea break. Okay, now I'm going to try the technology again, see if it's going to work for me this time. Okay, we're going to do the research station tour first. Okay, let me see. Sharing screen. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, and we're not able to hear it. Whenever you go to share, there is a little toggle switch that you have to click on first that says include audio.
Okay.
So do exactly what you just did, but then look for that. It's in the top left-hand corner whenever you share it, and it says include audio.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Tea field. Today we're going to talk a lot about tea terroir. That means the environment, the soil, climate, and also cultivar and production practices, processing, everything that goes into that cup of tea. And part of it is going to be this field tour. This is the first stop that we're visiting LSU AgCenter Hammond Research Station. And the next stop will be the Fleur Tea Company I meet. At this stop, you're going to see definitely a lot about tea field establishment and also research. This tea field has a different purpose. At another location, we're going to look at how growers are doing it. And this location obviously is full sun, and you can see the plants are planted not really in a raised bed, but relatively flat field with some of the slope going that way. And we have another field in the back showing you a different production system. First of all, I want to thank the State Department of Agriculture and Forest. This is funded by one of their block grant, specialty crop block grant. So we're very fortunate to have the support to get the field established and actually conducting research. Okay, now let's get the tour started. We're going to start from talking about soil and looking at what soil we have, because knowing about your soil is so important. So here we have a soil that is sandy loam and it's called kahaba. This is a very sandy soil, so it doesn't hold a lot of water, but it's kind of like easy to get water through. So this is a soil that is strongly acidic. Our soil pH is about 4.1 to 4.8. The subsoil is clay, a little bit clay, but still mainly sandy loam. So that means the subsoil also has a good drainage property. The water will go through pretty easily. So we don't have a whole lot of drainage issues. The other side of this, good drainage, but it comes with a limitation of fertility. The soil fertility of this type of sandy soil is relatively low, with over time soil runoff and water runoff and also leaching. It doesn't have a whole lot of fertilizer. So it's very important when you do the bed preparation to add in some organic matters that can help hold fertility and can help hold water. And here we have some type of pine bark mixed in to actually increase that organic matter. And also we always recommend to use a mulch. In terms of cultivars, it's very important that you pick up a cultivar that is adaptive to your environment. And here we just started with this variety that is a seedling, a seed propagated variety. It's called a Georgia tea, Georgia the country. Georgia tea, because it's a seedling, so you can tell that there's a lot of difference among the plants. Now, this is a field of cutting propagated tea plants. And this is available to homeowners. Horticulture is doing the variety promotion. If you look at this one, as a cutting propagated plant, they all look pretty much similar. So the advantage of this is going to be really good for mechanical harvest. Almost any cutting propagated field is going to be very uniform comparing to a seed propagated field. One disadvantage of cutting propagated field is that they are more susceptible if there's something wrong. For example, drought, flooding, or anything that is a stress or biotic factors like disease or insects, it will affect all the plants the same way. But a seedling field will be more resilient. With the cutting propagated field, we used a different type of planting. These are still 3 foot center to center down the row. However, between the row, we used a machine that are used by strawberry growers, the same tools to heap up the soil and make single rows. So this is the same way that we make a raised bed for vegetable, strawberries, and some of the other crops. So with this type of planting, definitely you can still use a one-man operated mechanical harvester, and also you can walk in between the rows to do hand plucking. As we have looked at the seedling field versus the cutting propagated field, either one of this field, we would recommend you plant the planting either from a cutting or from a seedling at this size. This is a treat gallon size. It's about a little bit over a liter of soil volume. That's how much root system you will get. So when you see the roots are covered inside and formed a nice root ball, that's the time to plant. This will ensure you a good start. And here we're showing a mulch study. This is the first study we did with this field. When the plants were still young, we used 4 different types of mulching treatment. Mulching can provide a lot of benefits. Basically, the primary benefit will be weed management, especially when plants are young, and then soil erosion management, also conserve soil moisture, and also provide some modification to soil temperature. Among the 4 treatments, overall, the black cloth provided the best treatment. And the other 3 mulches, pine straw and the hardwood mulch compared to the untreated, no mulch, still provided fairly good weed management. However, the pine straw really weared off quickly. So if you have pine straw handy, you want to use pine straw, you need to replenish your pine straw mulch every 4 or 6 months. So this is when you don't have mulch. So the weed competition is going to be the biggest concern when you have a young tea field, especially for the first 3 or 4 years. Supplemental irrigation is going to be needed for our type of soil. So in both fields, we have irrigation lines, and this is the flat irrigation tape. It's very cheap. You can get this from box stores or anywhere that have the garden supplies. And we have it, the drip holes for a foot. Every foot there's a drip hole. So we just lay this out on top of the soil, and then we mulch it, because that will reserve it. It's going to be good for a longer time. However, we don't really need this most of the time because of our climate. We have constant rain, especially this year. We only used it at the beginning when we just planted the plants, trying to get them established. And also, there's a lot of discussion about irrigation water quality. I feel we use a pond water that has irrigation, that has a water pH at 6.3, which is okay because our soil is so acidic. So tea plants like it to be 5.5 to 5.8 overall, but rainwater is 5.1. So overall, our water quality is very good. Trimming is definitely very important for managing a tea bush from the very young age. This is a research field, so we trim them only twice a year to measure plant growth. The first trimming is usually early spring before the first flush. And then we'll harvest first flush leaves for research purpose, and then we'll let the plant grow. And this is how much they will grow over 1 year. And now they are slowing down because of the short day lengths and also the cooler nights. So we're trimming them again. In production, commercial production field, you need to trim them more often. Whenever the bush is shooting out new stems, you need to trim it back and raise it gradually. Every time you trim it 1 or 2 inches higher. This has 2 purposes. One is to enhance the plant's branching, to encourage plants to put out more branches. The other purpose is to raise it gradually over time so you can have a plucking table. Something like this high that you can harvest the tea leaves comfortably or can run the mechanical harvester at the right head. So usually over 4 to 5 years, the tea bushes can be raised gradually to a really full, wider than this one, and also filled up with tips that you can harvest. Tea bushes in general respond very well to fertilizers, especially with our soil being a sandy loam. Crop response has been really just very good whenever we fertilize. And every grower probably are going to use different types of fertilizers. For us, we have been using the Osmo Coat complete fertilizer with macrons. So it's Osmo Coat Plus. The macrons are also very important. Those are the ones that will make sure you're not going to have deficiency of boron, manganese, and some of the macrons. That's very soil type specific. So we definitely recommend you to do soil testing before you plant or before you put down any fertilizer, and do it once a year to make sure you are putting out the fertilizer at the rate and type that is appropriate for the crop the crop actually needed. So with this one, it's a slow or controlled release fertilizer, and is in April. And this one has 8 to 9 months release period. But with our climate, it's going to be a little bit quicker than that. So we have been putting this out at a rate of 1 pound nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, only calculating the canopy size when we put it out, and put it out close to the bushes. So 1 pound nitrogen per 1,000 square feet at each time, and we put it out twice, once in the spring and once in the fall. At the beginning, when we plant, we also mixed up cow manure in the soil. We used just the black cow. You can see that in some of the stores. It's called black cow. And black cow has a 5% nitrogen. And other than that, it's mostly just organic matter, and to help soil return moisture and return fertility. For this field, the most significant pest that we needed to manage was the T-scale. And this is the same scale that will infest also other Camellia species, such as Camellia japonica. So if you have other Camellia plants like japonica or sasanqua nearby, and they are infested, that may go into your field. So this is probably the case here, because we have a lot of camellias at the research station. And the T-scale is very easy to identify. They will have these mottled yellow spots on the leaves. So when you go around your tea field and you see this kind like spots on the leaves, that's turn it around and you see the T-scales. They're very tiny, but they have a white cottony appearance. And that's definitely is going to be the T-scale. It's relatively easy to manage. We use pyriproxyfen, that's the active ingredient. In terms of product, there are several products offered with the same pyriproxyfen in it. Like Pivot 10, that's relatively inexpensive, or something more expensive like Fulcrum. So this is easy to manage. And you can just spray its insect growth regulator, so it's relatively safe for beneficial or pollinators, and also it doesn't have any toxicity food safety-wise. It's used as an organic pest management product all the time for vegetables and other crops. So it's easy to manage, but it's better to manage it at the early stage. When you see it, you just spray pyriproxyfen, or at this climate, it's cooling off, you can use horticulture oil or atropine horticulture oil during warmer days. That will be fine. So even if we have mulching to control weeds, sometimes you will still have occasionally big weeds. Like this one is a morning glory. It's a one type of weeds that will climb up the bushes. If you are regularly trimming your bush, it may not be a big problem, but it will be still in between your bushes. So you definitely still need to have a couple of herbicides for weed management handy when you need it. There's no specific products herbicide-wise that has been registered for tea. However, we can definitely use products that have been used on vegetables and other crops. So here, the bushes are still not really closing up. When the bushes actually close up, you're going to have fewer weed problems, but still watching out for the big ones and take them out just manually early in season, so they're not making this much of seed. That will be your best weed management. And this is the season that you're going to see a lot of seeds getting mature from the blooms last fall, as well as new blooms on the bushes for this year. So the seeds are very valuable when they're kept moist, and they lose their viability pretty soon when they dry up. So you need to harvest the seeds in time and keep them moist, either in a fridge or plant them in a pot or field and keep it moist, and they will germinate about February when it warms up. And seedlings, you're going to see seedlings popping up in the field. Sometimes if it's a seedling field, that's okay. If it's a cutting field and you see seedlings popping up from the tree, from the bushes, it's better to manage it and take them out. So that's our tour with the Hammond Research Station tea field. And as you all know, every tea farm or every tea planting is going to be different. Everyone has their own ways, and every site location is so specific. So we're going to move on to visit a tea farm not too far away from us, about 30 minutes in Amite, Louisiana, and that's Fleur de Lis tea farm. And you're going to see a lot of practices that you may want to learn more other than our research field.
Okay, everyone. That was the Hammond Research Station tea field tour, and let me pull up the other tour at Fleur de Lis Tea Company. And Mr. David Barron is with us in the class today. So we're going to have him answer questions after this.
Good morning, Ann.
Good morning. Good morning, David. Okay, there we go. We're here at the beautiful Lis Tea Company, and I want to introduce you.
Got an audio issue, I think.
Ian, we're not hearing the audio.
Okay, hold on. Let me double check my okay. Sharing. Why the audio is not working? Okay, let's see. Let's do this again.
Fleur de Lis Tea Company.
Is it
and
working?
I want to introduce you all Mr. David Barron.
It is. You're good to go.
Owner of this company. And okay, we're here at the beautiful Fleur de Lis Tea Company, and I want to introduce you all Mr. David Barron. He's the founder and owner of this company. And you can see this is a very different environment from the research station we just visited. So here we have filtered shade, and the tea plants, we have exactly the two same variety as we have at the research station. One is the Georgia tea, another one is the green tea, Beautiful. So now we're going to let Mr. David talk about their practice, how they get started, and what they are doing, what's their plan for the future. Okay, David.
Thank you. Very nice, Ann. Hi, my name is David Barron. I started the Fleur de Lis Tea Company in 2017. We planted this field, and I've been asked several times about how well the tea manages the weather here in South Louisiana, and how does it stand up to the cold. The very first few months of the life of this tea, we had Louisiana's heaviest snowfall in many, many years, had 8 inches of snow, and a few weeks after that, we got 4 inches of snow, and then the following January, we had the coldest January on record, and then the hottest February on record. So the tea was really tested in the first few months of their life, and they've done very well. So anyone thinking about planting tea in Louisiana, I would encourage that. This field, again, planted in October of 2017, has grown quite well. We have a pruning regimen that in late February, early March, we pruned the plants down to try to accelerate the growth, and we're also trying to train the trees to a 36-inch table height to make it convenient for picking. We also, in late July, when the trees go dormant from the heat, we'll prune again, but that's a much lighter pruning. The soil here, we have a very high water table, and tea plants really don't like wet feet. So we've had to make special arrangements when we prepare the row for planting. We had to bring in truckloads of topsoil and amend the soil with wood chips that we had decomposed, and brought in truckload after truckload to raise the center of the bed up 14 inches. And you'll see that when we go to the new field that we'll be going to. Here we are in the field that we planted a year ago, October of 2019, and this is a different plant. This is a plant that came from Australia. It's the brutiful. It's known for making green tea, and slightly different texture, slightly different shape of leaf, but a very hardy plant. Again, we have the raised bed to
Okay, sorry everyone, we have a problem here. I don't know why it still need to be downloaded, because this was already uploaded on the team folder. Jeff, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Yan.
Okay, good. Let's see if it's going to keep going.
Pick up the leaves, the roots from the water table, and we also on this field have pine bark mulch to help control weed, and it protects the plants in the winter. We also have overhead irrigation here that will run during the hot days of the summer. We'll run it several times. It's just a cooling mist to help cool the plants off. And my fields are planted in the shade of tall pine trees, and they get a dapple shade that the tea plants really like. Historically, originally tea plants were an understory plant. They grew under the shade of tall trees, and it really seems to work out well for us here. And we have the misting system, and it puts out a really fine mist, and it serves as irrigation and for cooling. Here we are in the new field that we're planting, and these will be the Georgia type tea plants. And as you can see, there's a special spacing. It's an international spacing that we use, where the plants are 36 inches apart here for the first two rows, and then we skip over to 48 inches apart to begin the next two rows. And they're also 30 inches apart this way. And that allows that the additional space here allows that so that you can walk down to harvest as the tea plants grow up. These two rows will grow together and leave a space here in the middle so that you can access both sides. Again, you can see where we have raised the bed and amended the soil. We also, when planting, we dig out and plant the plants in pine bark fines, and this is an example of it back here. And this is what we directly plant the plants in. The trees, the plants are an acid-loving plant, so we'll plant the entire plant in that, and then we use a larger bark called a nugget for a mulch on top to suppress weeds. And here is a pile of that. And after the plants have been planted, we will come back and cover the entire surface with the large nuggets. I'd like to introduce you to Hans. Hans is managing our tea fields and planting the new fields here. He just came on board a few months back, but has a great interest in tea, and we are very fortunate that he came along. Hans is going to show us now how we mulch the newly planted plants. So here we go.
Very technical.
We will eventually cover the entire row with these nuggets. As it breaks down, it also supplies nutrients. It keeps the soil on the more acidic side, and the plants really like that. Here we are at the Fleur de Lis Tea Company. It's under construction. We've spent a lot of time. We made the custom sinker cypress doors at our shop just down the road. And we are sticking with the New Orleans themes, the columns, posts, and pediments. Let's step inside and see what the view looks like from in there. And here we are inside the Fleur de Lis Tea Company. As you can see, we're under construction. One of the features that we're going to have is a large river table bar made out of sunken cypress that was harvested from the bottom of Lake Marpole. And it's a pretty interesting piece of wood. It has a lot of barnacles on it. Hans, we will we'll collect the seeds from the garden, bring them over to the seed bed, and you can see this is last year's seeds. We'll be removing these and transferring them to pots, and then we will start this year's planting for the new seedlings. And the way we do that is we plant them in a very close congregation. We'll make an impression with this tool in the potting soil, and in each one of these depressions we'll put a seed. So they're located really close together, like on 1-inch centers. So we do this, press it down, and it leaves that impression. And then we move over right alongside it and do it again. And so we'll have a seed in each one of those depressions. This time of the year, mid to late October, and we put them in the bed, and they will germinate in February. And again, these are last year's seedlings, and we were really busy. These should have already been repotted. But we have all of these, and these are the seeds that are underneath the shade cloth here, the seedlings, I should say. are the same from the same crop. So we planted about 5,000 seeds last year and had a very, very successful germination rate. These are the seedlings, and they go through a drastic pruning. We reduce them to one major stem, and then cut them down in the nursery, and that generates more multiple stem growth. So these plants here are 3 years old, and then these here are from 2 years ago.
Okay, everyone. That's our filters. That's our filters. We're kind of a little bit late in terms of scheduling, but we'll still give you all a 10-minute break. So now it's 10:16. Let's come back at 10:26. So 10 minutes break. How about that? Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yep, sounds good to me.
Okay, and I'm going to turn on my camera. I'll be doing this black tea that we received. Some of you received it. This is the black tea from the Great Mississippi Tea Company, Jason and Timmy. They have been really innovative, developing different types of teas. So I'm going to be making this tea if you're interested in watching. So just like entertaining. Okay, let's see, how can I pin this, pin myself up there? Technology is good when it's working.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention at the moment. What is it that you're trying to do?
I'm trying to pin my camera up there. You know, there's a pin, but I don't see the 3 dots. There's a pin next to the 3 dots, so everyone can see me.
So you can't necessarily pick their view. They can pick their own. So hold on one second. Let me see if I can do that real quick.
Okay, if you see my name next to my video, and is there a 3 dots?
If you right click on Yan's picture, on Yan's video, and it'll give you the option to pin her video.
Yeah, I don't see it from here. So.
No, but
we can change our own view. So we could pin, just like Jeff was saying, we can pin you, but you can't pin yourself necessarily.
Yes, yeah. All right, so I'm going to turn this around a little bit to show you all my little tea making table. So this is my second steeping with the black tea, and many of y'all received this one. Hopefully you already tried it. There are 2 ounces in that bag, so that's supposed to be good for several, at least 4 servings, at least for 2 people. So I use a small French press. This is a French coffee press, but now we can call it a tea press. And these are very, this come really handy. I want to have a piece of paper to put the spent or already steeped tea. So with this black tea, if you look at the leaves after steeping and you already enjoy your tea, this is almost like a reverse process of processing that tea, how it was made. So you'll be able to see, you know, the leaves, you know, what's in there, and if it went through oxidization, like this color, definitely a lot of, you know, dark brown, reddish brown. So this is a black tea completed processed, oxidized, but it's going to be very different when you look at the spent tea of a green tea or any other type of tea, depending on how they were processed. So this is your way to decode how it was done. And now I'm going to put The tea, this is the same that you all received in mail. Many of you received this one. So this is the Great Mississippi Tea Company, one of their award-winning tea, the Black Magnolia. And on the back of the bag, there is, on the bottom part, there is instruction how to make actual tea out of this. So this is to use 1 teaspoon tea per 8 ounce, 1 cup of water, and 200 degrees. So that's almost boiling water, a little bit lower than boiling water. Desired for 5 minutes or until desired sipping is achieved. Because tea, how thick or how we say it's thick or thin you want it to be is a personal preference. So you definitely can watch while it's steeping, while the water is working on it, and then decide when it's time you want to drink it. You want to stop it by the color and even the fragrance. And we usually put about 2 to 3 grams to make 8 ounces of a cup of tea. That seems, I already had my cup this morning, so I'm going to make a little bit less than that. And this is the kettle, the electric kettle I use. If you look at this one has a little bit kind of like buttons to control the temperature. So you can pick something like delicate, so that's 160 degree, up to 200, that's for black tea, and also boil. So usually I do a boil, let it cool off, and then go back to pick up a temperature. So your water is boiled first and then cooled, and then get to the temperature you want. So that's a little bit kind of manual. And I also have this. We do a tea tasting class with master gardeners, and we want to let them have the knowledge how to make your cup of tea appropriately, and then pass that on to the general public when they have event like a tea tasting. They can hold those class. So so a little bit public education, how to enjoy hot tea, or how to make tea in different ways, even if you want to make cold iced tea. So so this is kind of like a more sophisticated. It has a dispense, has a little motor, and this one you don't have to do the boiling and coming down and get to the temperature you want. It will all do it automatically. So there are different settings: 208, 195. 195, 175, something like that. Some of them will have different numbers, but they will be pretty much close. So now my water is ready. And I'm gonna watch it, the color change. Steeping tea and drinking tea is there's a lot of culture, ritual, and the thought or the way of tea into how to make this cup of tea. So with French price, we're going to do the pricing a couple times and let it sleep. Okay, now let's see if we have more questions. Anyone don't need a bathroom run or still hanging around during the break? Do we have any questions?
Yeah, and you have a question about Eastern style brewing.
Eastern style brewing. Is that the South Asian way? Oh, Gongfu. Okay, that's type of purity. It's a high pressure priced, highly priced tea, and there's a lot of there's still a lot of fermentation going on after tea is pressed and dried. So, because there's still some moisture inside, and whenever the oxygen go in there, it will be slowly fermented. So, so with Gongfu tea, you're gonna use a very small cup, and you're gonna use a very small teapot. So it's portable. You can put it in a small case and carry it with you anywhere you can have Gongfu tea. And Gongfu tea, the name comes from it takes time. So you can do up to maybe 15 steepings or brewings with Gongfu tea. So it has a very thick appearance at the beginning, but with more brewing, the color, the taste is all going to change over time. So it's the changing to watch the tea, how it develops from steeping to steeping is very enjoyable. Gongfu tea is very popular in Asian countries. Okay, so if we don't have more questions, let's go back to our program. I'm going to do a quick recap on tea production. Since we already have, okay, Leslie, do you have a question? Oh, that went away. Okay. Let's see. Okay, everyone, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So, so tea terroir, that's everything the tea plant or the tea leaves experience. So there are three major components. One is the environment, the bushes are growing. The other one, of course, is the practice, anything the growers do. And the other part is when the leaves are harvested, how they will handle the processing. So each component, there are multiple factors affecting them. As you all have seen during those field tours, the research field, there's some difference between the research field and the production field. But overall, the amide and the Hammond Research Station fields, the biggest difference is that definitely that sun, full sun versus filtered shade. So we have seen some difference in there. So other than those two tours, I'll just touch on some of the things that I feel may be important, but not said in those tours. Okay, come on, the mouse is not on the page. Okay, so at the very beginning, we need to think about the business side. If you are interested in doing tea production as a business, so planning is very important. And then there are all the things that we talked about, and also including capital management. So the planning part, we need to think about how many plants you're going to need. What's the acreage you want to plant? And here is just a simple calculation for single row. And here's the calculation, how many plants you're going to need per acre for a double row. And also the size of the plant and how you're going to do the site preparation. These are all the things you need to think because every location is different. Here, in this picture is the Great Mississippi Tea Company, and that's Timmy doing the spacing. And definitely you can tell they have a good grade. They have a good field grading. That's very important. And they at this specific planting, they used the quart size of the plants. the root system is fully developed, it's very good, and that's okay. But we still feel the larger size, the plants will be more expensive or taking more longer time to grow into a larger size. But it will ensure you kind of a better success. Capital investment. One of the very important planning is the land, equipment, supplies, and labor. These are all the costs you have to think about. We have an economist on the team. We're still kind of like a little bit behind doing the numbers, but I'm pretty sure any growers already harvesting and producing tea. If you talk to them, can fill in a lot of numbers on the capital investment. Definitely at the planting at the beginning, that's the most expensive stage you have to invest. Cultivars, we have covered this a lot, so I'm going to jump this. Heat tolerant versus cold hardy. So we are very, very different because I see many of y'all are from New Orleans, southeastern area of the state. As long as you're on the coastal area, that code is going to be different from the code the Great Mississippi Tea Company they experience up there in Brook Island. So in terms of variety selections, definitely we'll need to consider these two extreme events in terms of summer heat. Their heat is different than ours. It's drier up there, and also winter cold, because we are a little bit more kind of moderate because of the air humidity, because of the coastal climate. I think Jason, you're 8B, 8A, and in Hammond we're 8B. In New Orleans, you're 9A. So considering you're more tropical, it actually put you are more susceptible to a cold event because the plants are not acclimated to cold before the really cold events, especially in the spring. Another thing is sourcing tea plants. We had a lot of questions. I had emails even before this event from some of the attendees where to find tea bushes. I actually found some tea bushes at some box stores a couple of weeks ago. I was surprised to see they were offering 5 gallon size of tea plants, and they look like just regular sinensis. Definitely you can start with seedlings, cuttings, or even purchasing plants. I've seen a lot of growers that David and also Jason started propagating cuttings or from seeds they collect from their own field once they have a seedling field established. So that's definitely a more efficient and economic way to go. But at the beginning, how to find these resources, we can find you, we can help you. Seeds, you can collect your own and make sure they're moist. And if not, if you are collecting seeds that already dropped to the ground, you need to do a floating test, making sure you only plant the viable seeds. Cuttings, this is the picture I wanted to show you all. This is propagation base. They call it base because it's 6 million cuttings every growing season that been shipped out of that facility. And you think about why you need 6 million root tip cuttings, because cutting propagated field don't last as long as seedling propagated. They may be good, up to the peak of their production for like 20, 30 years, and then you're going to see some declining. So in China, they're always, for the big tea production farms, they always have some fields being planted, some fields being phased out. And if you want to do your own cuttings or you want to try to do some cuttings, this is the biggest hurdle or barrier will be your pH. You have to have a pH that is water pH that is about 5 below 6, or you have to have an acidifier, or you have to add in to acidify your water, because cutting that stage is very sensitive to pH. If you're growing seedlings, the seedlings may be okay for 2 or 3 months, even if your pH is much higher than that, but they will start to suffer once they used up the nutrients from that seed pod, they will start to really be more sensitive to pH. Transplants, both cutting or seedling propagated plants, they need to be transplanted once they have a relatively good root system to a larger container to actually grow a good sized transplants that will go to the field. And here shows both of these are cutting propagated. Large leaf, this is a tetraploid, and it has to be cutting propagated. It doesn't make a lot of seeds, maybe only a few when it's mature, because it's tetraploid. And on the left lower hand, that's a Louisiana tea. That's a tea named by Mr. Jim Phillips. He actually selected or developed that variety. So so you can tell when you grow the transplants, you can purchase the seedlings, purchase the seeds or the rooted cuttings at a lower price, and then you can grow it on transplants, or you can buy transplants. But definitely when you buy transplants, it's more expensive. And also it takes time, probably at least 4 months for a seedling or cutting to grow into a 1 gallon pots, treat gallon pots, and it's going to need a couple trimming to encourage them to branch. Location definitely has an effect on how the bushes grow. I just wanted to show you, y'all watch the video. I just wanted to show you something we observed, like the picture on the left showing the plant in full sun at the station. You can tell it's more compact, especially after the first a couple trimming. All the branches are tightly in that bush, and the ones on the right hand side is more kind of like open because they're under the shade. So they're trying to open up the canopy to get that's all the light they can. So it's in a more loose shape, and that definitely affect many things down the road. How the leaves position themselves. What's the chemical profile in the harvested leaves, and how well they respond to some of the processing techniques. Excuse me a little bit. And here for open field versus shade, and this is what Jason at the Great Mississippi Tea Company did over the past 3 to 4 years, is to leave a 7 foot wide area in between 2 double rows. So you have a double row, 4 feet in between. You have a double row, and you have a 7 foot in between to be able to get in some of the trees. And he used honey locust and also black gum, another one, to kind of like these are fast growing open canopy shade trees to kind of provide some shade. And it also serves as the shade also will improve your biological control using your natural enemies, because whenever we look at full sun location versus shaded or more favorable to insects, we actually see more natural enemies, more predators that will help you with your pest control, and also pollinators. These are good honey sources. Soil is definitely important. We have been going through some of this in tours, so I'm not going to spend more time on this. Louisiana has a very diverse soil profile. So these are MLRA that you can find them on the NRCS website, and any of the locations that is a farmland, you can pretty much put your GPS location coordinates in that the survey website, and you can find out exactly what type of soil you have. Like on this map is only coded for these soil profiles, and in each of these profile groups, there are subgroups. There's so many, so diverse soils. So you need to know specifically, especially within your parish line, what soils are available, and what's your specific type of soil. This is the soil pH for southeastern Louisiana. I kind of zoomed in to show you all. They're very different. So even if 1 mile away or less than that, you're going to see huge changes in terms of soil pH. So that's all depends on so many different factors. Which one is going to be the major, which one is going to affect less significantly. So definitely do a soil testing. LSU testing and analytical lab. This is their contact and the website, and they provide you all the information you need to actually sample and send in a soil sample for them to look at. So once you get that recommendation, you can look at exactly what soil amendments or fertilizer you need. So the soil testing is very important, especially for adjusting soil pH. There are different ways to adjust based on your soil type. And we don't have time to go into a lot of details, but we're hoping we can talk more about this, how to adjust if your condition environment, especially soil, is not the most favorable. It's okay. There are ways to adjust. And this is the picture, I think, at the Florida Lee's Tea Company. This was last year, showing how they use locally available material, green trimming, cow manure, horse manure, whatever that is available and low cost, and they will mix them up and do their own composting. So composting is very important. It serves so many benefits, but you have to do it in the right way. So there's no issues like weeds, and there's no issues like too high of a pH or too high of a nutrients or too low of a nutrients. We're not going to talk a lot about, because we already went through this in the videos. Just want to show you all the picture on the left-hand side, how that raised bed was made. So definitely the plants in the middle, those 4 rows in the middle, they are doing very well. And the plants that the side rows, they were suffering a little bit from that high water table and not very good drainaging. And I believe Mr. David Barron did a drench on the side to help with the ones that are on the side. Subsoiling or deep tilling, this is at the Great Mississippi Tea Company. They have more clay than us, right, Jason? Jason is still there?
Yeah, we've got windblown silt, Loess soil, so or Luss or Loess. So yeah, it's a clay loam.
Yeah, so that's why they always do subsoiling to break that clay pan, and that's what you see. And they are actually going to plant in the subsoil. Looks like the deep part, the different we plant, we fill it up and heap it up, and we plant on those heaps. Okay. A little bit about mulching is you need to find what's the best and most economic, what's available locally. That's very important because you're going to use a lot of it. Fertilization, definitely soil organic matter, and they're going to affect your leaf profile and the final products. I've seen a lot of growers at the beginning asking about organic production. We have not getting into that part at the research station in terms of research, because we have to have a field that's certified organic to be able to do the research. However, there are a lot of experience from other tea production countries, and also from Hawaii growers. I've heard several Hawaii growers talking about how important to them is the terroir, the environment, go as much as they can, go natural and go organic. They want to have the ecosystem there to work for them in terms of, not really going everything just considering input, output commercially, but are looking into a more sustainable long-term way to manage their tea planting and the environment they are in. I was very impressed by that. In terms of application rate and frequency, we always recommend, based on your soil testing, that recommended rate to split it into smaller applications, especially if you're doing this commercially and constantly harvesting leaves throughout the growing season. You're removing the leaves, that's nitrogen, so you need to replenish it over time gradually. So pest and disease, not a whole lot in our field. Also, I've seen most of our growers right now, especially those having new tea fields, do not have a whole lot pest issues. Sometimes you tea scale, but they're easy to manage. Sometimes you see chili thrips in the spring, especially if it's early warm spring. And sometimes you see leaf hoppers, but the leaf hoppers, they like it to be in the shade. So if you have a full sun field, you're a little bit less likely to see leaf hoppers. It's just too hot, they don't like it. Sometimes leaf rollers, and we've seen a southern armyworm one time, but it's very just, by chance they were there and they liked the root system of the tea bushes. So these are some of the things we see in the tea field. So definitely you can tell the one on the upper left is the tea scale, the one in the middle is the damage symptom from chili thrips. And some of the others, the bottom left is from tea, the leaf roller. There's so many leaf rollers. Some of them are caterpillars, some of them are soft lice. So as long as they're not, the majority not in outbreak, you don't have to control them. And also there's some beneficials I wanted to put up here. So whenever you do a pest management, keep them in mind. These are your allies and you don't want to do anything that are too harmful. And also there's one beetle there, something that just occasionally passing by like that grasshopper, they don't do anything. You see them, don't have to do anything. Disease issues, we haven't seen any, knocking on wood. For managing the disease, first of all, is to make sure you don't get cuttings from unknown resources, unknown sources. Only get your plants from reputable nurseries and check the plants when they come in, because we see most of the diseases are found in container grown plants because they are easily get stressed if that water routine is not keeping the root ball moist. Whenever they have the stress from watering, they're going to have some type of disease on their leaves. The more resources, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about this, but U.S. League of Tea Growers, they offer webinars. I'm going to be talking about pest management, I believe, in January, and then also Let's Grow Tea Facebook page. There's so many people interested in growing tea have signed up to that page. That's the page I check almost every day. And definitely Great Mississippi Tea Company Facebook. Jason, he's very quick in sharing information and sharing. I know he also shares a lot of jokes that make you laugh, but I check on their page because whenever they are harvesting, they're making new kind of teas, they will share. So that's a kind of something nice to watch. And then Hawaii Tea Society has a page, and also University of Hawaii, they have a list of extension publications that are very informative to read experience from Hawaiian research from the university. Okay, that's it from me in terms of production. And next, we're gonna have okay, Jeff, we're gonna have Dr. Kinney. So the slides in my talk, many of them are from the Great Mississippi Tea Company, and Dr. Kinney is going to talk about his visit to J&D Blueberry Farm, which is different.
Jeff, if you're talking, this is Adam. We can't hear you. You may still be on mute.
Okay, yeah, I'm trying to share my screen here.
Looks like it's coming up.
Am I there?
It's not
Yes.
showing it yet. It looks like it's almost there, or at least for me.
Can you see it, Yen?
No, and I still see your the circle when you talk.
It was in the process of sharing, but we weren't seeing your actual screen yet.
Okay. Yeah, I cannot find. It's not. There, I think it's coming up. There it is. Okay. Okay, I think we're there.
We are.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, so Yen had asked me to give a short presentation on a farm we visited in Poplarville, Mississippi, J&D Farms. And just to give everyone an idea of how you might look at adding tea as an alternate or another crop to what other current specialty crop you may be producing. And in this case, J&D Farms have been producing blueberries, I think, since the early 2000s. And they have both sell to the local farmers market, their fresh blueberries in the spring. And then they also freeze what blueberries they don't sell at the farmers market and sell them at wholesale. They have a rolling hills in southern Mississippi in Poplarville, which their soil's a little heavy, but with the rolling hills, they get good drainage. And also their soil is fairly acidic, so it lends itself to blueberry production very well. So they started investigating a few years ago the potential of growing tea as well. And as you've heard through some of the talks already this morning, that tea, most tea provides or prefers an or slightly acidic soil, as well as a well-drained soil, but that has good moisture content. So one of the things that they did when their original plantings is they decided that they may need to add a little bit more organic matter to their soils, and so they actually started growing in raised beds. The raised bed growing went well, but they also planted some directly in the fields in hipped up rows with mulch. And they found that they actually were able to grow straight in the soil as just as good or better that they were in the raised beds. So they were their main focus of production then was growing straight in the field. So just to give you an idea of some of the mechanization that they started using after they were originally hand plucking, they bought this simple tea plucking machine. And if I can get this work, we'll see if I can show it in action. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay.
We're seeing a static image. Is it a video that's playing?
Yeah.
We're not seeing the video,
You're not seeing the video? Okay. Well, then,
One thing you can try, Jeff, is you'll have to unshare, but then you can reshare if you share your screen instead of sharing just PowerPoint. I found that the videos seem to play better.
Okay. Let's see if I can do that real quickly.
I'm noticing too that one I think was a YouTube video. Sometimes there is a warning at the beginning of the PowerPoint that you can click on that says enable content.
Okay.
I got it on my screen to the YouTube page. Do you want me to share?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, that's probably good, Yan. That just gives everybody an idea of the use of that particular
Okay,
machine.
back to you. Yeah, back to you.
And so there are definitely other types of machines out there that can be used in tea production or in harvesting of tea and plucking. But that's just one simple, more inexpensive machine than some of the other ones. Another thing that I thought was interesting with at their location was they had a really nice chart of how different processing of tea can provide you with the different black tea, oolong, and so on. Their primary focus in tea production, however, was in black tea. Here you can see a part of their production process after they have finished doing their harvesting, their plucking. They then put lay the tea in these drying racks. After the tea has gone through the drying racks, they then put it into this roller here. And this roller then, after the tea wilts, I guess you'd say wilting racks, not drying racks. After the tea is wilted, it makes itself more vulnerable to the rolling machine, which then releases some of the oxidants and flavoring. And Yan, if you want to show, do you have that? I'll try to bring it up. I don't know if it's going to play. Is it playing? Are you all seeing that video? So move a little bit closer so you can see it. That's probably good on that. So if I can get there. So once the rolling is finished, the next part of it is actually putting it into what we call like a proofing oven, similar to what you do when you proof bread, which is a warm, humid environment, again, to complete the process of the release of the chemicals from the leaves. Once the proofing is completed, they then put it into the tea leaf dryer, which stops all the chemical processes of the tea leaves and dries the tea leaves. And then once completing of drying the tea leaves, there are then the remaining dried pieces of both the stems and the leaves are put through this tea filter and sorter. And so here you actually sort out all of the different particulates, the stems and so on, that aren't usable as far as the tea packaging goes. Once the tea has been gone through these sifter and filter, you then have a product like is in the container on the left. And this is their packaging room where they run it through their machine to package their different teas. They also then in this room blend different dried flavorings for the tea. So for example, if they're producing an orange tea with orange flavor, they would have their dried orange rinds that they add to the tea packaging. for point of sale. And so this tea growing has worked very well in dovetail with their blueberry production, in that when the blueberry production is over at the farmers market season, then they focus more on their tea sales for the farmers market. So a very good diversification of both using a soil that will grow similar types of plant material, both the camellia as well as the blueberry, and just having to change out or use different types of equipment. This is a residual that's left over. So just to give you an idea of all of the tea that you harvest is not going to result in the same quantity or result in the same quantity of the finished product. So this is the residual that's left over after the tea leaves have been sieved with the sieving machine. And just to also mention, Yan had given us a really nice tour of her work and the tea production or tea germplasm collection that they have at Hammond Station. For all of you in Mississippi or in closed states, at Mississippi State University, Dr. B has also got a germplasm collection there and is also working on production as well as a perfection of tea processing. And with that, I'm finished with my presentation, and I think we're back to questions and discussion.
Thank you, Judd. Yeah, anyone have questions? We have, let's give it 5 minutes. We're a little bit behind. Let's do 5 minutes.
I guess I have a question if anybody out there is growing other specialty crops that they might find that tea production could be part of their growing system.
I have I started with a small orchard, 2 100-year-old walnut trees and a couple apple trees. So I've been using the spaces around that, which is, for some light shading here and there. And then I've used the darkness of the trees for mushrooms and wasabi, which I was kind of inspired by, I think it was, I want to say Cornell University, McDaniel's Nut Grove, where they used mottled shade for a variety of specialty crops. So just an idea.
Yeah, the J&D Blueberry Farm, definitely they have schedule worked out to have these 2 crops. Both of them are as their major income in terms of timing for harvesting the blueberry and how that works with harvesting and processing the tea. It seems like they work together pretty well. So any more questions?
There's somebody is asking Yan what the IGR you mentioned for T-scale, the growth regulator.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Let me see that question. Yeah, I have the product here with me. This is okay. So insect growth regulators, very often you can see pyriproxyfen. Let me type it in the chat box. So that's one of the insect growth regulators. Another one is azadirachtin. Let me see if I spelled it right. So these are the 2 major active ingredients. The azadirachtin is really in neem oil or extracted as a separate it's a directing. So you can find this just as neem oil or as Azagard. There's a product called Asgard, and there are several others. They all have the same active ingredients. So these are the things you can use, and most of these are organic, USDA certified organic for organic production. Like this definitely have less concern about hurting the beneficials or food safety issues, especially when you are in production. When you are not in production, in the early years, if you have past issues, definitely these are the product to go with first. If it's really bad, we haven't seen anything really bad, knocking on wood, you can use some of the other contact or even systemic products at early stage, as long as you're not harvesting and selling the tea. Another thing to pay attention is you can spot treat. A lot of these soft-bodied insects like aphids, chili thrips, and scales. These are soft-bodied insects. They like to aggregate. So you're going to see hot spots, and they spread from that hot spot to other plants. So if you can catch it early and treat the hot spots, that will save you a lot of trouble from trying to spray the whole field.
Yeah, and someone was Debbie was asking and saying that white tea is her favorite, but it's always pretty expensive. What makes it more expensive to produce?
It depends on which one is your favorite. Like the tea, y'all got this sample. I feel the price is very reasonable. Of course, comparing to this is still considered a loose leaf specialty tea. Compared to bag tea, it's much more expensive, but you get more experience, enjoyable, flavor-wise, visual joy, everything. Watch the leaf expand in the water. So that's all depends on your experience and which one you're buying. Imported tea are getting more expensive, especially the loose tea, because the labor are getting more expensive in a lot of developing countries, because people start to go into the big cities, metropolitan areas, and the new generations, younger generations don't want to do farming. So we have seen that at several meetings when we met with the extension and regulatory people in China. They mentioned tea prices is going up.
Very good. Now, Brian St. George was asking if you wanted to grow a few of these plants at home, can all of these steps in processing the tea be done manually?
Pretty much. Hand processing is different. I'm going to touch on that a little bit when I talk about processing. Yeah. So let me see if we don't have any other questions. We're going to, Jason McDonald commented on why tea is expensive. So definitely want to talk a little bit about that when I wrap up with that processing session. So next we're going to have Dr. Fontenot, Kiki talking about consumer survey. Dr. Beasley already touched on what are the most popular teas in terms of types of tea in the US. And we conducted a consumer survey. I think the results are very interesting. Kiki, you ready?
Can everyone hear us? Hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect. Okay, so let me go ahead, and you should all be looking at a picture of tea leaves floating down from the ground. And it says the tea consumer survey. Can y'all see that slide?
Yep, you're good,
yes.
Kiki.
Okay, thanks. All right, so one of the things that we wanted to look at when we're talking about how to grow tea, we obviously in Louisiana, and I know there's a lot of people from other states on this call too, so I'm really excited about this. When we're thinking of this, in like the southeast portion of the United States, can we grow it? How do we grow it? But if we're going to get our commercial, in my case, I work with a lot of fruit and vegetable growers. If we're going to ask them to invest in a perennial type crop, you know, is there a market for it is going to be another huge question for us, right? So even if we can grow it, do people want it, and do they care about if it's locally produced and that kind of thing? So we set out to have a little survey, and we looked at people from all over. We had around 5,500 people take this survey, okay? All of the people who took it reside in Louisiana. So I think most of this data can be applicable to the way people in Southeast, you know, United States think. So Yan is working with a team of people right now on another grant, and hopefully we'll be able to take this survey with some modifications nationwide throughout the United States. But for now, you're going to get the Louisiana perspective. What was nice in this, y'all, is that it was almost equal male to females answering these questions. Only 40 people who took it didn't want to answer the gender question, which is completely fine. We did not ask for race in this survey, okay? So we do not know that. However, on the right-hand side, you can see in our table that we had the majority of respondents were going to be underneath between 18 years and 29 years of age. And that's because I work at LSU and I'm on campus, and I teach a introduction to agronomy class. And so we gave this survey out at all the Master Gardener talks that I give and garden shows and different things like that. In fact, you notice two other people's names on this, Mary Sexton and Celine Richard. They helped me grow tons of plants. And, you know, at our different garden shows, we bribed people with a free squash or a free tomato plant if they would take our survey. But the majority of respondents were these young people that I teach. And so they were all asked to take the survey, and they were all asked to also distribute the survey to people that they work with, people they reside with, their roommates, you know, sorority sisters, fraternity brothers, that kind of thing. So that's where the majority of our respondents come from. However, 832 people did not want to answer this question. So that's the way this survey was distributed. We had IRB approval, and everyone had to sign their names. So you know, I didn't hand this survey out to each individual person, but we could look at handwriting, and if anything looks suspicious, those were thrown out. These are 500 or 5,500 surveys that we truly believe somebody answered. So one of the first things that we asked them is, what caffeinated beverages do you consume? Soda and coffee, obviously we live in the United States, those are going to be top dogs. But what's nice to see that a little over half the respondents also already consumed tea. Now that was in all forms, iced, you know, hot, or in other products. And when we talk about alternative products, so when you're just drinking or consuming tea, do you consume it as something other than a beverage? And you can see a lot of people consume it as candy or throat lozenges. Ice cream was one of the top hits. And if you look in the bottom right corner, you see the green ice cream right here. They have, I think they call them, forget the name of them, but there's these little ice cream balls, and they have like a hard shell around them, and you find them in specialty grocery stores. And this seems to be, this matcha flavored tea ice cream is a hit with a lot of our young students right now. So this might be something that you're growing the tea, and it's never even going to enter someone's, you know, mug. It's going to go straight into a bowl as an ice cream dish for them. Personal grooming products, of course. When you guys look at shampoos, makeup for women, skin creams, tea is heavily being marketed as one of these natural components in these products. Obviously, weight loss supplements, every speaker has already talked about that, especially with green tea, tablets that you can take, or these detox type teas that you can drink that are supposedly going to help you lose weight. Now, on the other category, the person who said, 75 people said other, that they buy it in other products. But when you looked at that, they had to type in what that other product was. Most people just put on there nothing or not available, or I think they just felt the need to answer that question. There was one student, and I'm not trying to be lewd in this conversation, who said, and I don't know if it was a student or another person, I didn't look at the age, I'm assuming it was a student, said that they purchased sex tea. And I thought, well, you're trying to get my goat here. And so I Googled it, and it's true. There is such a product. And if you look at this bottom right-hand picture here, and I don't know if you guys are seeing, I have a Yan's name is appearing over it, but this gray bag right here is called Jackrabbit tea, and it's supposed to be an enhancement product. And so there is truly this kind of product on the market. They weren't just pulling my leg, although I thought they were. Where do our 5,000 people buy tea? The supermarket, of course, is the number one. So if you're looking at where you're going to retail this, where most people are going to buy it, you know, here in Louisiana, it is the supermarket. Next, we see restaurants, and that makes sense because you start having people ordering tea with their meals, of course. And then the convenience store would be the third, and I'm pretty sure that that's mostly the ready-to-drink bottled teas, like your green citrus tea, cold in the Coke, you know, counter aisle. So what form do most people buy teas? Here again, it's going to be our tea bags, okay? Second would be ready-to-drink teas, as you see underneath the Crystal Light, and then the green tea ready-to-drink. So I think that if we're going to grow this, and you're actually going to market it yourself, so you're going to have it where people come to your place and taste your tea, and you want them to take it home and buy it, you're going to have to figure out some way to either sell it brewed in, like, you know, big milk jug cartons, that kind of thing, or you're going to have to figure out a way to get it in a bag, because the loose leaf tea, while 700 and some odd people are buying it that way, that's not nearly the majority of the people want it, you know, bagged up or pre-made when we're looking at Louisiana consumers. Here, in what form and what season do you typically consume tea? Of course, iced tea, summer and year-round in Louisiana. And we knew that that would probably be the correct answer. And good for us as tea growers, we don't really care how they drink it. We just wanted them to buy it from us. So I like the fact that they're drinking it year-round, and iced is fine by me. Yan, is there any way you can oh, there we go. Now I can see. When we're looking at this question right here, all 5,000 people did not respond to this question. This was an optional question, because if you said you didn't drink tea, then you wouldn't have to answer this question. And, you know, you could move through this survey answering certain ones. So with this question, we only got about 46% of the total respondents, or 2,800 people actually answered this question. So about half of those drink it year-round and in the form of iced tea. When we're looking at how often it's consumed, this is really important for us as growers, because if it's just something like, let's take turkey for example. Well, I only eat turkey once a year at Thanksgiving. Well, probably not going to, you know, try to make you guys a bunch of turkey, you know, producers if that was the answer. If people ate turkey sandwiches every day, that's a great thing, right? So when we think about tea, how often is it consumed? The majority of respondents are saying, you know, between 2 to 3 times per week and year-round. So that means this is a beverage that's not just used at holidays or special occasions, but truly, you know, consumed a lot of the time. So it's worth our time investigating it. Do you assume, or do you think your tea consumption will increase or decrease in the next year? Now, this data, you guys, was taken in the end of 2018 and all through 2019. And we found that about 78% of the people who responded, only 3,000 people responded to this question, said they expect it to remain the same. So that's really good, right? That's telling us that we're not seeing that they're going to decrease. That's what we really wanted. It wouldn't decrease. It would have been great if 78% thought that they would increase it. And maybe that's when we will start to see this question change, is when we start having some locally US produced teas more on the market in the grocery store, not just online or at specialty shops, but, you know, maybe then we'll start seeing their consumption increasing. Where do you prefer your tea leaves to be grown? And you could only select one question or one answer on this, okay? You couldn't put multiple locations in. What we see is that about 60% of the respondents said that origin did not influence their purchase, okay? So this to me is promising for US grown tea, right? Because we know that based on Dr. Pika's and Beasley's and Keeney's and Chin's presentations, tea is huge in India, Sri Lanka, Kenya, right? So when we think about things, you usually think the person who's been growing it the longest has, you know, the most experience with it, probably has the best flavored tea. They're going to have the higher quality type stuff. But when we're looking at the people responding to this, origin doesn't, that's not what they're thinking about. They don't flip that box over and look at where it was grown. So that's good for us, new and emerging into this potential market, that people aren't going to automatically assume ours is of lesser quality. That's how I'm reading this data. I'm also seeing that 15% of the people care about locally grown tea. And so that's cool, right? Maybe we can get that 15% to now start purchasing our tea instead of foreign grown tea. And I think if you could couple it with things like your certified Cajun, certified farm to table, you would get that marketing recognition, you know, nicely on there. Now, some of y'all in other states would have, you know, Georgia grown maybe on your tea instead of certified Cajun, but you get the point, right? If you can start getting some of the marketing in with that, I wonder if people would change their minds when it's actually available to them at the stores. Now here we had the participants ranked from 1 to 4. They're and 1 being most important, 4 being least important. Their motivations to drink tea, and we can see that flavor is number 1. It has to taste good. And then for 2 and 3, the most ranked reason why they drink tea or motivation is relaxation. So this tells me if I'm a farmer and I'm going to start growing tea and I'm going to start doing a little of my own marketing at the farmer's market, or I'm going to be bringing it to local specialty stores loose, that I would want to claim that my tea tastes good and helps you to relax. Okay, those are the things people are really looking for. So we need to start thinking about using those terms in marketing our tea, or maybe showing pictures like you see down below where the person has this nice hot steamy cup of tea with their feet propped up. They're not working and drinking tea. It's not stimulating them and giving them more energy. It's helping them to stay calm, because that's what your future purchasers are looking for. Here, this is a lot of information on one slide, but it was the same kind of thing. Again, we wanted them to rank from most to least importance the factors that influence their choice when shopping for tea. And this is where we're looking at not only cost and availability, but locally grown, grown within the US, certified organic, or not exactly certified organic. Because for some of you guys who grow vegetables and fruits, we know that that's a lot of extra money and that's a lot of extra paperwork you have to do. But if you can communicate the idea to the consumer or to the person buying your product that you use sustainable practices, often that's enough to gain their trust and they buy your product. And what's interesting to me is a lot of people, you know, put young people. Remember, half of the people who answered this survey are 29 years of age and younger. And we tend to think that that age group is very concerned with the environment, very much, you know, wants everything to be organic and idealistic growing conditions, which don't always, you can do it in Louisiana, but it's harder, right? Because of our climate. And the same with the whole Southeast region. We're hot, we're humid, we're full of insects and disease. And when we look at number 6 and number 7, so the least important to them, we're going to see that's where we start. Most people are ranking certified organic or using sustainable practices. So maybe that's not the thing that you want to focus on when growing your tea to gain more customers. You know, I'm not saying don't grow it organically or don't grow it sustainably. It's just that's probably not where your marketing dollars should go to. And if you need to use an herbicide, like Yan was mentioning, or you need to use, you know, an insecticide to kill some of the scale. Now, we know oils and soaps work great for that, but if you have to use something a little different, that's not necessarily going to mess you up for who buy your tea. What they do care about, again, is quality, flavor. You have to market flavor of your tea. That's where most people are ranking number 1, and we get the most respondents. And then 2nd and 3rd is the availability. So you guys, we have to start growing it. We have to start getting it out where they're going to see it. Where are they going to see it? The grocery store and the gas stations. That's where most people buy their tea. So that's where we need to look at putting some of these local products to see if we can get more people to buy it. Here again, you see how likely are you to purchase certified organic tea? 50%, not quite, 42% of the people say they're neutral on it. It's not a factor that they're looking at. It's not influential into whether they're going to buy it or not. So, less than 10 or so percent care about that. And same with sustainably produced. Again, when we're looking at just pulling out these factors from the survey, people are very neutral on this. So again, as growers in the Southeast region, maybe this is not how we market, and this is not going to be our first priority when growing our tea. This is a telling slide right here. So this is where we're asking about price and what people are willing to buy, right? So can I get any more money if I market it as locally grown and that kind of thing? So what we said is, assuming imported tea prices are $10 an ounce, and that would give you 20 servings at local stores. Well, if we can't just give them ounces, because people don't often think of it in ounces, they think of it in bags, right? So how many servings can I get out of this? And that is a premium price. If any, would you be willing to pay the same amount for the same quality of tea for tea that was grown in the United States? Okay. Most of our respondents, the top bar, looking at $10 an ounce, you can see that about 2,400 people said they're going to pay the exact same price for it. Now you see about $12 an ounce. We get a good, fifth of our population answering this question, saying they would go up about $2. Only 93 people are going to go up to the $20 per ounce range right here. This question was, you had to respond even if you said you didn't drink tea. We still wanted to know, theoretically, would you pay any more for this product? Remember again that the majority of the people responding to this survey are between the ages of 18 and 29 years. They're still in college. They have part-time jobs, or they don't have the money that us full-time workers have, or maybe some of the retirees have. And so I can understand that at this age and at this time point in their life, they're going to say, yeah, I'm going to pay the same price. I'm not going to pay more. But let's think that, this survey now, this data is a year and a half, working on 2 years old. These people are that much closer to graduating, right? And so we can think that maybe if we had a slightly older population, we could see this price point increasing a little bit, just because hopefully they'll be graduated and have, a little bit more secure income coming in. But we know at least that they're still willing to pay the same price for that. So in conclusion, because I only have 10 minutes, I have to keep this quick. 30% of our respondents drink tea. We cannot expect at this point a higher price point just for marketing it as local. Maybe if you can get the local and the flavor going, then maybe your price point would be higher there. We do not need to worry right now as growers about being certified organic or sustainable. Those aren't concerning factors to the people buying our tea, at least based out of this survey. But availability, so just having it there. People are going to buy it if it's just physically there. They don't want to have to go on the internet and order it. They want it to be at the grocery store, right? And marketing it as having nice flavor is going to be important to you. And that's what we need to do. We need to ask ourselves, can Louisiana producers grow a tea that tastes comparable or better than what people are already getting on the market? And that's going to be when Yan talks about how to process your tea, right? Because processing it really affects flavor. And how, as Louisiana growers, can we get this tea into bags or into bottles? Because that's the way people are buying their tea right now. So, we can't just maybe leave it loose for everybody. If you're going to sell it to like a niche market or an individual tea or coffee store, sure. But if you want the masses to buy your tea, if you really want to market it to a wider audience, we need to investigate these areas. So with that, I will open it up for any questions and see. I kind of went through it quick, but I know we're already behind schedule. Or I guess we wait for questions at the break.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's get the other two presentations done. So hold on to your questions. Let me share my screen really quick, and I'll just, okay, let's see. No. Okay. I'm going to try to wrap this up really quick, and then we'll have Dr. Zhijin Liu to talk about analytical process, how we do some basic analysis. So everything today we have been talking about is kind of touching on some of the most basic things that you need to know as a person that just getting into tea production or growing a tea, making tea. So for the terroir consideration processing, there has to be some methods that you have to trial and error and try different things and make sure. Can you all hear me? My mic is. Can everyone hear me? Oh, okay, good. Because I don't see my mic. Okay. So this is the same thing as when we talk about the environment, that so many factors can go to different ways. I feel we have been learning a lot from our growers that are ahead of us in terms of testing different ways to process, taking notes and record everything, and then also developing a new tea type of teas, and also kind of like raise the expectations for U.S. grown tea. I have had 3 or 4 trips to the Great Mississippi Tea Company, and Jason was very open, sharing everything with me. So I was able to put my hands on processing some of their award-winning teas. So that was a good learning. So I want to just show some of the pictures, what I learned from those trips. But first of all, common types of tea. This is a picture showing when we were visiting China, we participated in this tea tasting. So that's how professional tea tasting is set up. So you basically have from lighter color to darker color, you have white, yellow, green, oolong, black, and dark. And Gongfu tea is part of the dark tea, part of the pu'er or brick tea in that category. However, because it's drank in a different ways, so a lot of people think it's a different tea, different type of tea. And most important to our market and even for our growers to consider when you're marketing your tea is to do flavored or blended teas. Like Kiki just mentioned, people are still, especially younger generation, there are more people getting into green tea, getting into specialty tea, getting into enjoying making tea, steeping tea, the process, instead of just grab a ready-to-go bottle tea. However, still the majority of the market is going to be the flavored or blended tea or even bottle tea. I still feel that's not really the market our growers want to target right now, because price-wise, you cannot compete with imported tea or large bulk purchase from the companies, the brewing companies, and then they do the bottles. So so that's still not, and also amount, production ability wise, that's not the market we're targeting with the current number of tea bushes or acreage we have as U.S. grown tea. Still, that specialty tea is our market. But if we're looking to the future, these are the things that we need to consider is flavored or blended. Even if a specialty loose leaf tea, people wanted to have, you know, the diversity they can choose from. And there's also a culture part to how we don't really appreciate a tea just by itself. That's changing, especially in some of the west and east coastal areas where we have more people getting into that culture fusion with Asian or other tea, traditional tea country influence. They started to appreciate more just the tea itself. So these are some of the considerations. So what makes the difference? Why, you know, it's all depending on your processing. So this is, I'm not going to go through everything. Basically, the teas are processed by different degrees of how the leaves are pressed, damaged, bruised, oxidized, and how they were dried, how they went through the heat and stop oxidization. That heating can be steaming, can be pan fried, can be sous vide. So it all changes the final product, how it looks, smells, and the taste. The season to drink, we don't really care a whole lot about that. That's more like a traditional tea country. They have, you know, certain type of tea. Part of it is everyone wants to drink the tea in season, just processed. or not too long in storage. Another one is they believe the health benefits from the tea is really work with the season. Like black tea will be more appropriate for winter because it's completely oxidized. It's very warm. It's very the taste it goes well with meat when you eat more meat in the winter, and the green tea will go better with seafood when you eat more seafood in the summer. So those are the type of things. Field harvesting, before we go into processing, let's talk really quick about field harvesting. You've seen Dr. Kinney showed this one-man harvester. However, still, it's going to be, the quality is going to be less preferred or less premium than the hand-plucked leaves, definitely. And this is the right-arm harvester that used in Japan, very expensive. And this is at the Great Mississippi Tea Company that Jason and Timmy, they are testing this prototype of harvester that is mimicking the hand plucking. So if you can see here, there's kind of like a rubber surface down there. And once the motor dry, let me see if I can get it. So this is much quicker than hand plucking, and it's mimicking hand motion to break the stem with a rock break. And also you can change raise or lower the head to control that. So that's some new development. I was always impressed to see the growers testing new techniques. And food safety is another thing you have to think ahead of time before you start processing, because there are regulations you have to combine. And this shows how detailed Jason, they did a good job tracking everything, even the bags of ice they buy from the grocery store used to cool off the tea after the heating. So tea tasting, when we talk about tea quality, it has at least two components. One is the sensory quality. Another one is the component, what's in the chemical components. So when you look at sensory quality, a lot of times the professional tea tasting involves smelling the dried leaves and do the first and second steeping and looking at the color of the liquor and do a tea tasting, and then also looking at the spent leaves. This is more for the chemistry part, is the quantification of a lot of active ingredients in a tea product. This is back in China. We visited kind of like a quality testing center. That's one of the many in China. They have probably at least one per province, tea producing province. And by the corner, left side lower hand corner, you can see some tea products other than the leaf, the loose leaf, specialty tea, bottle tea. There are other products like extractants, like EG extractants and tea flavor extractants, theanine. Those are all considered health supplements in China, and also they export a lot of these are for exportation. So so all of these have to go through a quality analytical testing for if it's for exporting to Europe. It needs to go through more than 400 something of active ingredients or contaminants. Everything together is more than 400 tests. So there are, before the pandemic, there were several processing workshops offered by the U.S. League for Tea Growers. That's the Grower Association for the continental part of the tea growers. And we have been visiting the Great Mississippi Tea Company several times. This was this was 2018 that we did plucking and processing for green tea. So I'm going to use 3 slides to go really quick for 3 exemplary tea, how to process them. No time to go to details, but we're hoping we can do a Tea 201 to touch on some of the things we couldn't go into details today. So white tea is the least processed tea, and it's going to need the most tender leaves. Even comparing to green tea, white tea has to be more tender because it's not processed. So when you steep the tea, it has to be tender enough to release the chemicals, the flavors. So the process is very easy. Visoring, you can visually judging what's the degree you want to visor it. As long as it start to get really soft and a little bit shrinked leaves, you can dry it. The recommended temperature is 165. But this was processed in summer. I only have 170 with my oven at home. So we processed white tea from 33 selections out of our seedling field. And by the same processing timing and degree, so we were trying to compare how they are different in terms of, between the selected seedlings with visually different phenotypes. So Dr. Zhijin Liu is going to analyze this in terms of caffeine and some of the other chemicals in the leaves. And this is the least processed white tea. So the green tea showing here, this is the tea workshop actually 2 years ago, 2017, I believe. So they may be doing it a little bit different, improving some of the things, but these are some of the most basic steps for Jason and Timmy to process the Mississippi Queen, which is a green tea. So it involves visoring for several hours, and they weigh and weigh again before and after visoring to make sure it's getting to the percentage of water content, dropping water content. And then it was the heating, and here it's showing the steaming. They also tried sous vide. And then it's visoring again after cooling, using the ice to cool it off after steaming, and then get rid of the extra excess water, and then visoring again, and then rolling to get all the juices out. So by that time point of processing, the oxidization was stopped. So it doesn't really have any injury, the leaves, and get it to oxidize. So this green tea is not oxidized. Basically, after rolling, is going to the drying, and by the standard, it's dry enough. That tea is good to be packed and go through the mellowing, settling. So that's green tea. For black tea is the opposite, because black tea is completely oxidized tea. So this one, you still let it visoring, but because you pluck the leaves a little bit more mature than the green tea, so you will need a little bit more time to let them visor to stand to a point that you can roll them. So it's visoring overnight for leaves to get to the degree you can roll them without breaking them. So rolling, you can see on that rolling pan, it actually showing some of the forming. So rolling, it involves several 5 minutes rolling, and then let it sit and open up and turn it around, and then rolling again. So it's a completely, injury the leaves, making sure it got all the juices out. And then it goes into a proofer where it's warm and humid to go through oxidization, and you need to open it up and check on them and flip them over every an hour or two to make sure you get enough oxygen to the leaves and for a more complete oxidization. And if we have time in the discussion after the program, Jason can tell you more about all this process, and then it's drying. So this picture shows how the tea looks after drying, and it will look really dark. And the liquor should be amberish or even darker brown. Oh, that's Jason and Timmy trying to see if it's ready after drying. Oolong is more complicated. I went up there and visited them a couple, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and see how they did their Mississippi Belle oolong tea. This is something they just developed this year, something really new, and it goes through something different, very different. First of all, after these are leaves plucked or harvested with that machine I just showed you all, and they will go through withering, but under UVB light, to give them additional stress. As that light heat the leaves will go through more chemical stress and emit some of the chemicals changing in the leaves. And shaking and bruising using this a tunnel roller, and I'll see if I can get it to work. So it's a bamboo, it's made of bamboo, and bamboo they will have different levels when they are raised together. The leaves are constantly get eaten by the bamboo. And this is how it looks like after that rolling. The leaves will get just right, after several rolling and then cooling off, rolling and again cooling off, the leaves will show this oxidization or bruise along the main one and also on the side of the edges of the leaf. And then it's heating. So once that is to the extent they feel is good, and they really take notes and record everything, and it goes to the heating. So heating here is a sous vide. The sous vide cooking actually is just hot water boiling, but it's in a vacuumed, no oxygen bag to make sure they don't oxidize further and to make sure that heating is uniform. And then once they are in that bag, once they were taken out, they will be packed again into a bigger bag, vacuum sealed, and put it in a fridge or freezer to cool it off really quick so the leaves won't overcook or be overheated. And then it's the rolling. So the rolling is really getting juices out because we used relatively more mature leaves, so there wasn't a whole lot forming like the black tea. And here is the drying. So that's how they make the Mississippi Belle tea. So that's all the processing. So far, I have learned at the research station. I'm just recently moved to campus, and we're still trying to transfer some of our machineries, processing equipments over there to set up our research lab. But processing-wise, Mississippi State has been done a whole lot with a tea master over there. And also, I just want to show you all how this was kind of something innovative, different